You know, most people think what they do or what they make is incidental, but we think there are small miracles happening all around us. All you have to do is slow down, turn down the road less traveled. So hang on while we educate you, inspire you, and entertain you as we stroll, if you will, off the beaten path. Skydiving. Looks easy enough, right? Well, hang on. Well, we see what it's like to jump out of one of these things when it's up in the air. Kevin Reynolds and I are about to embark on a tremendous adventure off the beaten path, but I'm talking really off the beaten path. Kevin's a local guy. You're from Harrisonburg, is that correct?
Actually, I'm here from right here in Orange, Virginia, but I live in Greene County now.
Greene County. Kevin, we are going skydiving, which is unique for off the beaten path because usually we're on the ground, right?
Correct.
How'd you get involved with this?
Well, I was airborne when I was in the Army, and when we moved back here to Orange, my wife told me I needed to get a hobby, and I think she was counting on golf or crochet or needlepoint, but I chose skydiving instead. So we're having a good time for the last 12 years doing this.
Wow, and one of the things that's unique about Kevin and some of the other instructors here is they do actually precision skydiving, which means they've got to be careful where they're dropping into, what the wind speeds, directions are. How did you get involved with precision jumping?
Well, right after I got my license, I went to a football game here in Orange, and my friends here at Skydive Orange jumped into that football game. And professional demonstration skydiving.
Wait. Jumped into that football game. That doesn't mean they're in the stands and they like walk in and try to interrupt.
No, they just land right in the middle of the field, usually with the game ball or the American flag or whatever the customer would like us to do. And I watched that and I said, that's what I want to do. And so I worked over the next few years to fulfill the prerequisites to get my professional demonstration rating. And so I do that as well. It's a lot of fun.
And you actually instruct people how to do that as well?
I instruct people on how to get their license and, first-time jumpers like you who are coming out here to jump for the first time. Yes, sir.
Wow, what a thrill. Now let's look at some of this equipment here and explain it to us. Now you've got, it looks like a huge backpack. I know that this is an altimeter.
Correct.
The helmets and so let's go through this step by step.
Right.
And explain everything here.
Well, what we've got, like I said, this is an altimeter, which is essentially a barometer, and it measures barometric pressure as it relates to altitude off the ground. And so, as we ascend or descend, this indicates that accordingly on that. This is our parachute system. It's a tandem parachute system, so it's larger and more robust than your typical sport rig. But what you've got here, you've got an automatic activation device, which will get the parachute out at 1,900 feet if your instructor doesn't do anything.
So this is on the descent?
Correct. And your reserve is up here on the top half, and your main is down here in the bottom half. They run about $14,000–$15,000, so they're not cheap, which is good. Obviously, if you're going to do something like jump out of an airplane, you don't want to go the discount route. But we here at Skydive Orange make sure that we use the newest, most technologically advanced pieces of equipment for our customers, and this is a Sigma parachute rig, and I really love it. It's a state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line piece of equipment, so we're happy to be using those here.
And there's two chutes in there.
Correct. Your reserve is on this upper half, and your main is on the lower half. It's called a dual container system.
Now, some of the technology here dates back to the early 1900s, I would suppose. What's the difference between the parachutes now and how you handle them as opposed to the old paratrooper days, like the military days?
The concept of the parachute actually goes back to Da Vinci. Da Vinci actually designed a parachute system that worked, and they tested it a few years back out in Arizona. It was pretty neat. It's made of like canvas and wood, and it actually worked. But so it goes back that far. Essentially, what you've gone from is what they call a round parachute that really doesn't have much in the way of steerability to a semi-rigid wing that you can pilot almost like a glider, and that's what we've got nowadays in this system. And so that's what enables us to do things like land on football fields and in very tight areas, because we can actually pilot it much like a glider or an airplane.
Yeah, I've seen pictures of them. They look like waffles, kind of a big waffle.
Correct.
What does it take, and how small are the drop zones that you can get into? How do you do that?
You know, as far as getting into different areas, it depends. And obviously, each one, you have specific considerations as far as obstacles and landing area and weather, and you take all of that into consideration. But, you know, for me, when we jump into these areas, you know, I look at your approach and how much runway you have, so to speak. But in order to qualify, you've got to get 10 jumps in a row within a 10-meter diameter circle. And you have to be witnessed by a safety and training advisor from USPA, and you have to call it. And so that is how you verify that you are capable enough to do these sorts of things.
So when you're up there and you've pulled the ripcord, what do you share with people as you're floating down?
Shoot, that's a lot of fun. You know, we'll be flying around in the airplane, and I'll point down at James Madison's home, which is Montpelier here in Orange, and you know, we always have a fun time talking about our fourth president and the constitutional relevance of that. And you know, also, you know, I could point to a mountain over here, which was Lee's Forward Lookout Point in 1864. It's where they spotted Grant crossing the Potomac, not the Potomac, the Rapidan at Germanna for the you know, for his offensive. And so there's so much history, and you know, it's easy to point that out and show everybody where it is.
What do you point out that's really noticeable?
You know, I'll point out Lake Anna. A lot of people know about Lake Anna. I mean, if it is really super clear and you know where to look at what time, you can see peaks of otter, which is pretty cool. You know, I always point out, you know, the Blue Ridge Mountains, and sometimes I'll play a joke on people and say, see the mountains beyond the Blue Ridge? I'm like, that's the Rockies. And they'll go, what, really? I'm like, no, I'm just kidding. So anyway, it's fun to have a little fun up there and get that perspective. But there you can see lots of stuff. Culpeper, you know, Charlottesville, you can see over the mountain into Elkton and that sort of thing, Harrisonburg. It's pretty neat. Really, really beautiful views here in Orange.
It's always fun when we go to some of these adventures that are unique like this to ask you what you would suggest to the weekend warrior like myself to prepare for, if he even considered it. What sort of aspect do you think is the most important for them to make the decision to come out here?
I mean, the most important aspect is, do you want to have fun, and do you want to get outside of your comfort zone a little bit, maybe conquer a fear, maybe do something that your friends haven't done that you've never done. I mean, less than 1% of the population ever jumps out of an airplane. And what I'm telling you is, if you want to be part of that 1%, you got to get off the beaten path and come down here to Skydive Orange, and we'll take good care of you.
Amen to that. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was a great time. Looking forward to it.
So it's the first jump for you, Pete?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Any idea what to expect?
A little hot air.
Yeah, a little bit. And a whole lot of fun.
Amen to that.
Because we're going to climb into that airplane over there. We're going to fly it up 2.5 miles, open up the door, jump out, fly back down well over 100 miles per hour straight towards the earth. You excited?
Absolutely.
A little nervous?
No.
Well, now I'm a little nervous if you're not nervous.
Yeah, definitely. I'm fired up. This should be fun.
All right, well, thanks for having me along on your jump with you, and I'll see you at the plane, buddy.
All right.
Kevin Reynolds.
That's it.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is a little unusual introduction to Off the Beaten Path today, but we are exceptionally far off the beaten path. As a matter of fact, we're already probably 5,000 feet above the beaten path. We're on our way to 15,000 feet or so, at which point we will rapidly descend. We'll talk about it in just a couple seconds. Stay with us. Well, as you can see on my altimeter here, we're approaching 6,000 feet, which means we're roughly halfway up. We're going fairly rapidly. There's 12 people on board this plane, including the pilot and a videographer. He's got a camera on his hat. Matter of fact, there's a couple of guys with cameras on their hats in here. Kind of like you see in the magazines of those wild adventure dudes. That's what these guys are. They're adventure freaks. Talk about a thrill. Now, I'm attached to Kevin, so I don't really have to worry about anything. Kevin's gonna pull all the strings. And to Kevin's left back here is Mario. He's another one of the photographers. Mario's been around the block several times, and of course, several times higher than the Empire State Building as well. So we rotate around here. It's a pretty impressive flight getting to altitude.
All right, Pete.
You see it, brother.
Welcome back to Earth, buddy.
Whoa.
Yeah. Gotta get your land legs back.
Right on, baby.
Woo! All right. So, Pete, how's it feel to be a skydiver?
Well, I don't know if I qualify for that, but
Hey,
we
you
made it down.
You just jumped out of an airplane. I saw it.
That was so exceptional. I had a beautiful day.
Yeah.
Kevin let me steer the thing a couple times. Now, imagine, if you will, the most extreme roller coaster you've ever been on. Kevin did that to me up there. He said, let your hands up, hold them down. We went weightless for about 10 seconds. And I almost touched the beats. But
What was your favorite part of the jump, Pete?
jumping at the first 5 seconds out of the plane.
It's like sensory overload, yeah?
Spectacular. Just, I can't believe I'm doing this. And Kevin just, poof. No second thoughts, baby.
So would you do it again?
Absolutely.
All right, good deal. Got a satisfied customer here.
Right on, man. Thank you, Pete.
All right, Pete, I want to thank you for doing your jump here at Skydive Orange. We'll see you on the next one, buddy.
No, right. Woo! See you on the backside.
All right.
Welcome back to Earth, right? Or see you on the next one. I like it. Anyway, there will be one for me, and that's because Kevin and his assorted different instructors over there at Orange have thousands of different jumps between them with absolutely no mishaps over the years, largely due to the high technology involved with the equipment they use. Almost foolproof, slight chance of human error, but very doubtful. They're highly trained professionals over there. I mean, think about it. The elder President Bush jumps every year, and he's in his 90s. You would think you and I could do it too as well. I think we can. Kids under 18, parents' discretion. Now we're going to head up into space, way higher than 15,000 feet, with a professor at James Madison University Planetarium. A really cool guy, a really cool subject. Stay with us. This afternoon we find ourselves in a unique location, and it's actually not that far off the beaten path. You could just look around in town and you'd never even know it's here. This is the John C. Wells Planetarium on the campus of James Madison University. They've got all sorts of unique projects going on in here, and it's very educational and really interesting. So let's go on inside and take a look at it. And yes, now we're inside the planetarium, John C. Wells Planetarium, with Professor Chanel Verani. And Chanel, you've been here for quite a number of years. This is a tremendous facility for a number of different reasons, but let's just begin with you. How did you start in astronomy, and how did you get here?
I've always been fascinated with the sky and understanding the stars, the constellations, and a lot about how we know what we know. Some of my earliest memories are learning about the Apollo program and how we sent 12 American men to the moon and what they learned. And so that has always been the constant flame that I wanted to fan. So when I got to high school, I wanted to learn more physics. When I got to college, I wanted to learn more physics so I could pursue the astronomy. When I went to graduate school, it's when I learned that I have a real passion for teaching. I really enjoy teaching, and so I really sought a place where I could combine my love for astronomy and teaching and talking now to the public about how we know what we know.
As a pastime, as an astronomer in a pastime, when you were in high school, what prompted you to motivate others to participate as well?
I think this is the greatest story, what we're doing. You know, I think you can trace the start of science of every culture by going outside, confronting that night sky, trying to understand what it is we're seeing, trying to understand what it is we're looking at. And of course, there are these grander questions, right? What does it all mean? Are we alone? How do we fit into this grand scheme of things? I think it's the greatest story.
Outstanding. Now let's come back down to Earth.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny, when you say planetarium, a lot of people get mixed up. They say arboretum, planetarium.
Right.
So it's sort of interesting. Explain what a planetarium is to us.
A planetarium is the facility that allows you to project the sky onto a dome. So if you look at our dome here, it's the inside of a ball, right? We're looking in the inside half of the sphere. And using either a set of computers or the star ball that you see behind me over my right shoulder, we're able to now project the sky onto the dome and tell visitors about the stars, the planets, the constellations they could see that night at that location. But we can literally go to any place on the planet. And we can go in the past 100,000 years, we can go in the future 100,000 years and look at what the sky would have looked like from that location or will look like from that location.
Let's look around this the auditorium here.
Yeah, I use this $2 million facility to teach my astronomy classes. It's Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 9:30. So what you said, you nailed it on the head. I have a hard time, even though I try to be engaging and try and make the material as illuminating as I can, pun intended, to my students. 9:30 in the morning in the dark with reclining comfortable seats. It's hard to stay awake.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, you asked what is the planetarium. This is not, my father's planetarium. This is not the planetarium of decades ago. It is now an immersive experience. As I said, you're able in real time to be able to fly through the cosmos.
That's the incredible thing.
Yes, to see some of the exoplanets that are discovered, stars.
Show us up here.
So our star ball, it's an optomechanical device, and you can see there are actually portals where light can come through. This is what allows us to project the stars and the constellations they're part of. And you can see there are two parts. And that's because the top part allows us to project stars and constellations we can see from the northern hemisphere, but we can equally show you the stars and the constellations you can see from the southern hemisphere. And unless you've traveled to the southern hemisphere, it's something you would never see unless you came to a planetarium. So we could show you the northern hemisphere with the southern hemisphere. We can talk about the different constellations that you can see. We could even talk about constellations that would be common to both hemispheres, like Orion, for example. If you live in mid-latitude regions, how would Orion look like from the southern hemisphere?
And would the Big Dipper be upside down? Or
Exactly right. You could if you're near the equator.
some of the stars that we think of, like the Northern Star, for example, what would that be in the southern?
You wouldn't see it from the southern hemisphere,
Okay.
right? Yeah, because we can only see the northern star from the northern hemisphere. And so the Big Dipper is really useful because it allows us to find Polaris, the North Star. You can take the two stars in the bowl and it points towards it. In the southern hemisphere, we don't have an easy way of finding the southern pole, but there's something called the Southern Cross that allows us to get a hand to be able to locate it.
And as we move up here to this control area, which I assume this is like the cockpit of the whole place, right?
Yeah, this is the console of the Starship Enterprise. That's what we like to call it. And so this is how we operate all of the machinery during one of our star shows. So
Here, you can have a seat as you're at the controls here.
I joke that this often looks like, the console of the Starship Enterprise, and it literally is. And everythh's at a touch of the button. So
I can see you're moving the machine over here.
Right. So as our star ball comes up, and this is always the first ooh-ah moment. Every time we have a school group or a public show, because this thing is in that box. It's buried in that box. And so when we raise it and it's in the dark, audiences isn't expecting that. They don't see it like this when they come into the show, right? Because it's all tucked away. One of the neatest things we do now is every time there's a new exoplanet found, every time NASA finds a new planet orbiting a nearby star, we can actually go to that star and give a view of what it would look like if you were in a spaceship and you went to that star.
Well, now, Professor, I don't want to stir up any controversy, but there is some talk about the government's not wanting to spend the money to go out and investigate all these stars because they'd rather spend it on curbing a man's input into the atmosphere. That is the issue of global warming. Are mankind, are we causing it, or is it an effect of like the sun? Or give us an idea. There's some conferences that deal specifically with this.
There are many areas of science that deal with climate change, and that's this is quote unquote a controversial issue. Climate change is, like evolution, is quote unquote a controversial issue. They're controversial only in popular culture. These are not controversial scientific issues. The science is well established for climate change, for an anthropogenic, a human cause, a human basis for climate change. And
anthropogenic, that's a word I've never heard.
Man-made.
Yes, okay.
As opposed to saying, being sexist.
Yeah.
There's an enormous amount of data now telling us that the climate variability, the warming of the climate that we're observing and have observed over the last 1.5 centuries, roughly 2 centuries, is indeed largely caused by human activity. And that's you may ask, how do we separate human input from natural variability? And that's, of course, the most important thing. You want to make sure that the changes we're observing, the rise in temperature that we observe, is not due to some natural phenomenon, We want to be able to find the cause and effect. And that's why the science behind climate change is so overwhelming now. It's not one study. It's not looking at one thing. It's many convergent lines of investigation. You can look at water temperatures. You could look at land temperatures. You can look at ice cores that scientists have now extracted from the poles. And this gives you a record of the global climate over time spans of about 800,000 years. So you have huge baselines. Natural variability, of course, is something that you need to account for, but the rise in CO2 levels that we've observed over the last 150 years, and that correlated rise in temperature, a large fraction of that is human caused.
What could possibly be caused by nature? In other words, we've had ice ages in the past.
Right.
We've had incidences of major volcanic eruptions.
That's correct.
And also the exposure to the atmosphere of all this ash
Right.
is capable of making major climatic diversions, and they've occurred millions of times in the millennium.
So over the age of the Earth, some 4.5 billion years, the climate has varied tremendously, right? It has varied tremendously. Now, how we know that the last 200 years or so, since the dawn of the industrial age, that is due to man-made, human-made activity, is of course we can account for how variable the sun is. We can observe the sun. We can account for sunspot activities. We can account for changes in the solar luminosity that may have an impact. And once you account for that kind of natural variability, i.e. output from the sun, right? Because that's an important ingredient in this story. Local ingredients, as you observed, there could be volcanic eruptions. We also know that the Earth's tilt, the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees, right? But that tilt wobbles. And it wobbles over about a 26,000 year period. And so that can induce climate change too. So even after you account for all of these natural ingredients into what we're observing, once you subtract it, there's still a rise in CO2, a substantial rise, and a substantial temperature increase. And after you remove all the natural possibilities, what's left is us. The conversation we're having about climate change, about all these issues, is actually pointing to a larger issue we have in our society today, and that's scientific literacy. In the sense that, our society has become so technological, so much so. There's more technology in our smartphone, for instance, than put the 12 Americans on the moon between 1969 and 1972. We've become so technologically advanced, very few people understand it. Very few people understand even how science is done. We asked questions about, as we started talking about climate change, I said it's not a controversy in the scientific community. Every scientific academy has come up with, has published a position paper, has come up with a statement saying that the climate change we're observing, that we're witnessing, is human-induced. So it's not a controversy in science. It's people trying to understand science.
Great. And you do no small part in educating the public, in addition to your students. You have a lot of projects going on here at James Madison University, with whom you associate yourself now at this point as an astrophysicist.
Right.
What do you do to reach out to the community, and what can we do in the community to try to learn more about our own environment? And how does that apply to our daily lives? In other words, how can we help make a change?
So these are great questions, and you're absolutely right. Our fundamental mission at the planetarium here, and I would argue for almost every planetarium and science center, is science education and engagement.
Amen to that.
Talking to the public. We need to talk to the public about how science is done, how it is done, how do we make the advances we do, and how it is open. It's open to everyone, and it's open, absolutely. And it's open to anyone who wants to take part in this engagement. The one thing that I can't give to someone or impart to someone who visits us is curiosity. So if we turn ourselves off to those kind of questions, those larger questions of who we are, where are we, how do we fit in the grand scheme of things, if we turn ourselves off, then I think we do suffer the consequences of not trying to understand the world around us. As long as we continue to ask these basic questions of who we are, where are we, and how do we fit in the grand scheme of things, there's always going to be some segment of the population that's going to be interested in pursuing these truths of why is the universe the way it is.
Where we fit into the grand scheme of things, that's a great question, isn't it? And the professor certainly had some interesting suggestions for how we really do. Well, you know, the James Madison University Planetarium has free shows every Saturday throughout the winter. And I'll bet you, if you look in your directory, most major universities across the nation probably have similar programs. Check out your listings, look for it. You could learn something, maybe even practical. Until next time, stay off the beaten path.